My friends, if you find yourself in the midst of such a journey, don't rush through it. Embrace the quiet, the discomfort, and the pain. It's all part of the process. And in the end, you'll find that the mental journey you undertake after someone disappears is not a path to despair, but to self-discovery, healing, and ultimately a new chapter of your life. The aftermath of disappearance, exploring the emotional and psychological journey. When someone significant disappears from your life, the emotional and psychological effects are far-reaching, whether it's through the end of a relationship, the sudden absence of a loved one, or a shift that leaves you separated from a once constant presence. The aftermath can feel like an earthquake in your emotional landscape. This disappearance isn't just about losing someone physically. It's about the mental and emotional vacuum that gets created, one that can feel almost impossible to fill. The mental journey that follows is often a complex, unpredictable process. The immediate aftermath is marked by confusion, disorientation, and the overwhelming sense of loss. You may find yourself desperately searching for answers or clinging to any remnants of connection in an attempt to understand what happened. The absence of that person brings forth a cascade of questions and a chaotic swirl of thoughts. Why did they leave? Was it my fault? Could I have done something differently? These initial thoughts often feel as though they're on a loop, repeating over and over again with no resolution. You start to realize that the disappearance wasn't just a single event. It's a seismic shift that has altered your sense of reality. Suddenly, you find yourself faced with the harsh reality that you no longer know how to navigate your world without that person. Even the most mundane aspects of daily life are now colored by their absence. You begin to notice all the places where they once existed, from empty spaces in the house to the places you used to visit together. The places that once brought comfort now bring a feeling of hollowness, an echo of something that was once full of life but is now devoid of meaning. The emotional impact of their disappearance forces you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about yourself and your connection to the world. You might find that some of your greatest emotional comforts are tied to the presence of this person, and now you're left with the challenge of learning to live without them. The emotional impact begins to take its toll. It's not just sadness that you're left with. It's a complex mixture of grief, loneliness, confusion, and sometimes even guilt. The grief doesn't just manifest in missing them. It manifests in the realization that you may never truly understand why they left. It's the loss of potential, the loss of future moments, and the loss of what you had envisioned together. In this emotional haze, it's easy to get trapped in a cycle of negative thinking. Thoughts of inadequacy and self-blame often surface. You might find yourself asking, what could I have done to stop this? The emotional weight of these questions can create a sense of paralysis, making it difficult to move forward. Yet even in the midst of all this, there is a quiet, subtle shift happening within. This is where the mental journey takes its first turn. The initial shock and pain of the disappearance begin to give way to a deeper questioning of self. You start to explore who you are without that person. You wonder what parts of yourself were influenced by their presence and which parts are truly your own. This period of self-examination is often painful as it forces you to confront the person you have become in relation to them and who you might be now that they're gone. This reflection can be disorienting because for so long your identity was intertwined with theirs, whether it was in the way they made you feel, the shared experiences you had, or the role they played in your life. Their absence forces you to look inward and ask, who am I without them? You find that the mind's tendency to replay events, conversations, and decisions grows stronger. You begin to dissect every moment, trying to understand what went wrong. What signs did you miss? Where did things start to unravel? This constant replay of the past can feel like a mental prison, trapping you in the cycle of what ifs and if onlys. And while the mind may be trying to make sense of the chaos, it often only deepens the sense of confusion and regret. But there's another, quieter force at play. Amid the constant questioning, there's an opportunity for growth. though it's often hard to recognize in the early stages. As you wrestle with your feelings of grief, confusion, and self-doubt, you begin to gain clarity. This clarity doesn't necessarily mean you'll find all the answers or understand everything about why they left. But it's a mental shift that helps you see things differently. It's the realization that while their absence has altered your reality, it doesn't define you. The emotional roller coaster that follows the disappearance forces you to learn how to cope with the unpredictable nature of your feelings. There will be days when you feel like you're making progress, and then days when the pain resurfaces with full force. It's an ebb and flow that feels exhausting, and it's easy to feel like you'll never find a sense of peace. But within this mental journey, there's an important lesson. Healing is not a straight line. It's messy, it's non-linear, and it's unique to each person. The more you learn to embrace this unpredictability, the more you start to heal. The constant loop of mental agony begins to quiet, and you start to find new patterns in your thoughts. You begin to reclaim your space, your time, and your life. And in doing so, you realize that while their absence may have left a hole, it has also created room for new opportunities. You begin to rebuild a sense of identity that is not dependent on the presence of another. In the aftermath of their disappearance, you may discover a new version of yourself, one that is stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of moving forward. The emotional and psychological journey that follows the disappearance of someone significant is a challenging one. It's a journey marked by pain, confusion, and the search for answers. But it is also a journey of growth, reflection, and self-discovery. And while the road may be long, the process of healing offers the possibility of a deeper connection with oneself and a new understanding of what it means to live in the face of loss. When someone important disappears from your life, the emotional impact isn't just immediate, it lingers. It's a feeling that doesn't fade away quickly, no matter how much time passes. In those first few days, weeks, or even months, your thoughts are overwhelmed by the sense of loss. The person who once was a key part of your existence is now absent, leaving a vast emotional void that's difficult to fill. In this period, one of the most significant things that occur is the overwhelming need for reflection. Reflection doesn't merely mean thinking about the events that led to the disappearance. It goes deeper. It involves searching for answers, understanding yourself and the other person, and examining every action, every word, and every moment you shared. This constant reflection becomes a coping mechanism for processing the emotional chaos left behind. And it's essential to the healing process. However, it's not always an easy or straightforward path. Often reflection comes with mixed emotions: confusion, anger, regret, and sadness. It's like trying to piece together a puzzle when you don't have all the pieces, and the pieces you do have don't fit perfectly. You might find yourself replaying past conversations, analyzing every choice you made in the relationship, and searching for reasons why things unfolded the way they did. The mental struggle during this period is intense as you sift through feelings of guilt and self-blame, wondering if there was something more you could have done to prevent the disappearance. You search for patterns in behavior, thinking perhaps if you had been different, more attentive, or made different decisions, the outcome would have been different. This reflection isn't always logical. Often it's an emotional attempt to regain some control over a situation that feels entirely out of your hands. It's easy to fall into a trap where you endlessly question your actions, but rarely do you acknowledge that the disappearance may not have been about you at all. Yet that's the challenge of the reflection process. You're trying to understand not only what happened, but why it feels like you've lost a part of yourself in the process. While this can be emotionally draining, reflection also serves an important function in helping you come to terms with the reality of the situation. It forces you to face uncomfortable truths, to process the hurt, and ultimately to accept what has happened. In the absence of clarity, your mind tries to create it, and in doing so, you confront the deeper aspects of your own identity. What you'll soon realize is that this phase of reflection isn't only about trying to make sense of the disappearance of someone else. It's about understanding who you are without them. The nature of reflection begins to shift. At first, it's entirely centered on the person who is now absent, but slowly it expands to include thoughts about yourself. Who are you now that they are no longer there? Who were you when they were present? And how have you changed since their departure? The reflection begins to focus on your emotional state, your vulnerabilities, and your strengths as you assess how you've been affected by their disappearance. With this process comes an internal conflict, where your mind struggles to reconcile the reality of the loss with the person you were before it happened. Reflection forces you to look at the emotional scars left behind, and often this results in uncomfortable realizations. It's not uncommon to feel disoriented, wondering who you've become without the person you once relied on. This journey can feel like walking in a fog, trying to make sense of where you're going, while struggling to even recognize where you've come from. While this might seem like a dark and unending period, it's important to note that the power of reflection lies in its potential to foster growth. It's during this time that you begin to develop a deeper understanding of your emotions and, more importantly, yourself. As your mind works tirelessly to process the absence, you might stumble upon insights that you weren't expecting, new strengths, new perspectives, and new ways of thinking. The questions that arise during reflection are not just about trying to understand the past, but also about preparing yourself for the future. You begin to consider your needs, your boundaries, and what you truly want from relationships moving forward. This process might lead you to new realizations about your own desires and what has been missing from your life. The power of reflection isn't about getting all the answers. It's about the wisdom that comes from asking the right questions and being open to the insights they provide. One of the most significant outcomes of this process is that reflection gradually moves you from a state of loss to a state of potential. The absence of the person may never fully go away, but as you reflect, you start to shift from focusing on what was lost to focusing on what is still possible. This process helps you rebuild your identity, not by erasing the pain of loss, but by integrating it into your life in a way that allows you to continue moving forward. You may start to realize that your journey doesn't end with their disappearance. In fact, reflection reveals that their absence can become the catalyst for profound personal growth. Through this reflection, you recognize that while you may have once defined yourself through the connection you had with them, there is more to you than just that relationship. Reflection allows you to rediscover parts of yourself that were buried beneath the weight of the past. The mental journey of reflection following the disappearance of someone important is a difficult but necessary process. It requires you to delve deep into your own psyche, to ask difficult questions, and to come face to face with your own vulnerabilities. But through this process, reflection becomes a pathway to healing and transformation. It's not an easy journey, but it is one that offers the opportunity to rebuild, to grow, and to understand who you truly are, even when the person you thought you needed is no longer a part of your life. When someone who has been integral to your life suddenly disappears, the emotional impact is seismic. The absence isn't just felt in the empty spaces they left behind, but in a deep internal shift that can force you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about yourself. The person who once played a central role in shaping your identity, whether it was a partner, friend, or family member, was more than just a presence. They were part of the framework that defined your world. Their absence doesn't just create a physical void. It creates a psychological and emotional void that is much harder to fill. This disappearance challenges not just your relationship with them, but your very sense of self. Who are you without them? What happens when the person who you thought was your constant is no longer there to give you a sense of purpose, belonging, or identity? This internal struggle with change is one of the most difficult aspects of navigating loss because it doesn't just alter your outer reality, it forces you to look inward and question who you truly are. The relationship you had with that person likely influenced many aspects of your life. Your daily routines, your goals, even your sense of who you were in the world. The moment they disappear, it feels as though everything you once knew about yourself begins to unravel. You're left trying to pick up the pieces of your own identity, unsure of where to start. The self-image you once relied on starts to crumble, and in its place, you are left with uncertainty. It can feel like you're walking through life with an incomplete map of who you are. The emotional bonds you once shared with that person gave structure to your day-to-day existence. Those bonds are severed. You're forced to question the roles you played and the person you believed you were. If you were once someone's partner, friend, or confidant, what happens when you're no longer defined by those roles? How do you define yourself when the relationship that gave you a sense of identity is no longer there? This existential questioning can be overwhelming. You may feel lost, as though you've been stripped of something essential to who you are. It's like stepping into a room that used to feel familiar, only to realize you no longer know where the door is or how to find your way out. In this moment, you might experience a deep sense of disorientation as your identity is challenged by the absence. You may even begin to wonder whether you've ever truly known yourself outside of that relationship. It's easy to feel like a version of yourself that was tied to the other person no longer exists. And in their absence, a new version of yourself is left to emerge, one that might be difficult to recognize or accept. The struggle with change intensifies. You might find that some aspects of yourself are easier to access while others feel completely foreign. Certain habits or routines you once had may no longer feel appropriate, and you might struggle to find new ones that make sense in your now altered world. The simple act of living day to day can become complicated as you navigate the emotional weight of their absence. You might feel an overwhelming urge to hold on to the past, to keep the connection alive in your mind, even though the person is no longer part of your reality. It can be comforting to stay tethered to what was, but ultimately, it's a form of resistance to the inevitable change that has already begun. Change, though painful and difficult, is unavoidable. As much as you may want things to stay the same, the disappearance of someone forces you to confront the reality that life will never be as it was before. The change isn't just a shift in your circumstances. It's a deep transformation within yourself that requires you to adapt, to let go of what was, and to find new ways of defining yourself. This reevaluation of self-identity often brings forth a struggle between the desire to maintain the past and the necessity of embracing the future. It's natural to mourn what's been lost, but it's also vital to recognize that with loss comes the opportunity for growth. You may find yourself grappling with conflicting feelings. On one hand, you miss the version of yourself that existed within the relationship, but on the other hand, you begin to sense the possibility of rediscovering who you are without the presence of that person. The absence forces you to confront parts of yourself that were once hidden or overshadowed. The transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it's often messy, filled with moments of doubt and confusion, but it's also a process of discovering new dimensions of yourself. Strengths you never realized you had, desires you hadn't acknowledged, and aspects of your personality that had been dormant. The disappearance of someone you loved or were close to becomes an unexpected catalyst for self-discovery, albeit one that is painful and disorienting. The struggle with change starts to feel less like a battle and more like a necessary process of reinvention. As you move through the grief and emotional turmoil, you begin to see the possibility of a new identity emerging from the ashes of the old one. You may no longer be the same person you were when that person was in your life, but you're not completely lost either. Instead, you're becoming a version of yourself that's been shaped by both the presence and the absence of that person. This is a powerful realization. Change isn't about erasing who you were. It's about evolving into a new version of yourself that is no less valid or important than the one that existed before. The struggle with change is, in a way, a struggle to redefine your own narrative It's an opportunity to reclaim ownership of your life and your identity. And though it comes with difficulty, it ultimately leads to growth. You might not have asked for this change, but as you navigate it, you'll find that it is, in many ways, an opportunity for you to step into a future that's uniquely yours. The disappearance forces you to ask yourself what truly matters and to build a life that is defined not by the past, but by who you choose to become moving forward. When someone significant disappears from your life, the emotional journey that follows is often a wild, unpredictable roller coaster. The grief of losing someone close to you is compounded by the mental toll of trying to process the absence. This mental and emotional turbulence is not linear. It doesn't follow a predictable course where you can expect to move from sadness to acceptance, from confusion to clarity. Instead, it's a constant flux between extremes of emotion, often within the same day, and sometimes even within the same hour. The initial shock can send you spiraling into despair, and before you even have the chance to come to terms with the reality of the situation, you might experience brief moments of hope or clarity that suggest things might eventually improve. These fluctuations in mood can leave you feeling mentally unstable, as though you're constantly on the edge of a deep emotional dive, only to be pulled back up with a sudden burst of optimism or insight. In the aftermath of someone's disappearance, it's not uncommon to experience intense waves of grief. The heaviness of their absence fills your thoughts, and the sadness becomes all-consuming, clouding your perspective. During this time, your mind is filled with endless questions about what went wrong, about the final moments you spent together, and about what you could have done differently. This grief can feel like an overwhelming wave crashing over you, and it can be difficult to find footing when the weight of emotions seems too much to bear. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there are moments where you might feel a flicker of hope. It may be as simple as a memory that brings you comfort, or a moment when you catch a glimpse of the possibility that life could still offer something good despite the pain. These moments of hope are fleeting, often brief, but they offer a sense of light amidst the darkness. You might find yourself thinking, maybe things will get better, only to be plunged back into sadness moments later, as though your emotions are in constant battle. The contrast between these intense emotional shifts can create confusion. One minute you feel like you've made some progress in healing, perhaps because you've had a good day or a breakthrough moment where you've started to accept the loss. Then, without warning, a wave of grief hits you again, seemingly out of nowhere, dragging you back to a place of despair. This back and forth emotional turbulence can feel exhausting, as though you're trying to make progress but can never quite escape the pull of grief. The constant unpredictability of your emotional state makes it difficult to know where you stand. It can feel like you're trapped in an emotional cycle that has no clear endpoint, leaving you to question if the pain will ever subside or if the grief will always linger. It's important to recognize that the feelings of instability are completely normal. Grief isn't something that can be neatly packaged or processed in a straight line. There will be days where you feel like you're making headway, and then there will be days where the pain feels just as fresh as when it first happened. The idea of moving on might seem distant and impossible during these times. At times, you might even feel guilty for experiencing moments of happiness or calm, as if you're somehow betraying the memory of the person who is no longer in your life. This sense of guilt can fuel the emotional roller coaster, creating a cycle of highs and lows that feel difficult to control. It's essential to understand that these emotional shifts are part of the healing process. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow, often uncomfortable journey that involves ups and downs. The grief might be intense one moment and seem less severe the next, but each emotional shift is part of your mind's way of processing the loss. As you navigate through the emotional highs and lows, you'll begin to realize that they don't have to define your mental stability. Instead, they serve as indicators of your resilience and your ability to endure the complex and painful process of loss. The emotional fluctuations you experience are a reflection of the depth of your emotional investment, and while they can be overwhelming, they also signify that you are actively grappling with the pain and working through it. With time, the intensity of the emotional shifts may begin to lessen. You might find that the lows are less extreme and the highs, those moments of hope, become more frequent. These moments may not erase the grief, but they offer a glimpse of the possibility that life, though forever changed, can still have meaning. The emotional roller coaster gradually evens out, allowing you to settle into a new normal. While you may never fully stop grieving, you begin to understand that the pain doesn't have to dominate your existence. It becomes something you can live with, a part of the complex web of your emotional life, but not the sole defining force. Navigating the emotional roller coaster is never easy, and it can feel like a constant battle to find emotional stability. However, these emotional fluctuations are part of the process of reclaiming your mental and emotional balance. The moments of grief and sadness, alongside the brief bursts of hope and clarity, offer an opportunity to reflect on the changes you're experiencing and to acknowledge your growth. In time, the emotional turbulence that initially feels uncontrollable will transform into a more manageable flow, allowing you to regain a sense of mental stability. Though the pain may never fully disappear, you'll discover a deeper understanding of your own emotional strength and the resilience that can carry you through the most difficult times. The disappearance of someone important from your life often leaves a feeling of unfinished business. It's like an unresolved story that you can't quite put down, a chapter left open without resolution. This sense of incompleteness fuels the quest for closure, a deep, almost primal need for finality that can significantly influence your emotional and mental journey. Without closure, it can feel as though you're stuck in a perpetual state of limbo, unable to move forward because you're constantly looking back, searching for something that would offer definitive answers or give meaning to the loss. Closure is not just about receiving an explanation for the disappearance. It's about finding a way to make peace with what happened, even if the reasons behind it remain unclear. The absence of closure often feels like a door that remains ajar, keeping you in a state of uncertainty and confusion. Your mind fixates on the what-ifs, endlessly replaying events and conversations, trying to understand what went wrong and why things unfolded the way they did. This mental loop makes it difficult to let go of the past and move forward. The desire for closure can manifest in many different ways. It might take the form of seeking answers, wanting the person to explain why they left or what caused the rift in the relationship. Sometimes you might even fantasize about a final conversation where everything is laid out in the open and you receive the closure that allows you to release the pain. In other instances, closure may come in the form of a physical gesture, something tangible that allows you to mark the end of the relationship. It could be returning personal items, having a last conversation, or engaging in some kind of ritual that symbolizes closure. However, not all relationships provide this kind of clear resolution. Sometimes people disappear without explanation, and this leaves the person left behind in a state of emotional purgatory. The inability to find closure in these situations can lead to prolonged emotional distress, as the absence of answers keeps you emotionally tethered to the past, unable to truly heal. What makes the quest for closure so complex is that it's deeply personal. Closure means different things to different people. For some, it's about understanding the reasons behind the disappearance or knowing that the other person has moved on. For others, it's about finding a sense of acceptance, even in the absence of answers. Some might feel that closure only comes when they can forgive the other person or themselves, while others might need the finality of a clean break, something that helps them seal off the past and move forward with their lives. This search for closure can also lead to frustration, especially when the other person refuses to provide it, either because they can't or because they've chosen not to. In these cases, the person left behind can become fixated on the need for closure, unable to move on until they feel that something definitive has been resolved. Closure is not always something that can be provided by the other person. Sometimes it must come from within. It's about accepting that the answers you seek might never come and learning to live with that uncertainty. This realization can be incredibly difficult to reach, but it's an essential step in healing. Finding closure in this sense doesn't mean getting the final conversation or explanation you hope for. It means accepting that life doesn't always offer neat, tidy endings and learning to make peace with the ambiguity. In many ways, closure is about reclaiming your own power. It's about deciding that you no longer need the other person to validate your feelings or provide an explanation. You come to understand that the process of healing is yours to control, and you can choose to let go, even without full understanding. This shift in perspective is not an easy one, but it's one that is necessary for true emotional freedom. The quest for closure is a critical part of the healing process, but it's important to recognize that closure doesn't always come in the form we expect. It may not come from the other person, and it may not look like what we thought it would. But when closure is found within, it offers a profound sense of peace, allowing you to finally release the emotional hold of the past and move forward with your life. When someone important disappears from your life, the initial reaction is often one of disbelief, followed by intense grief, anger, or confusion. You may struggle to accept the absence, unable to comprehend how life can go on without them. The idea that life could continue without this significant person feels impossible, like the very fabric of your existence has been torn apart. But as time goes on, something remarkable happens. You start to realize that despite the pain, despite the heartbreak, life does indeed continue. The power of acceptance becomes a transformative force, allowing you to slowly begin to integrate the loss into your life and move forward, even though things will never be the same. Acceptance is not about forgetting or dismissing the importance of the person who has disappeared from your life. It's not about pretending that the loss didn't hurt or that you're over it. It's not a process of moving on quickly or easily. Instead, acceptance is about coming to terms with the reality of the situation and learning to live with it. It's about acknowledging that while the loss is real and painful, life can still hold meaning and purpose even without that person by your side. The power of acceptance lies in recognizing that the absence of someone important doesn't define your future. While it may take time, learning to accept the loss allows you to shift your focus from what is missing to what is still present in your life. This doesn't mean that the pain goes away, but rather that it becomes something you can live with and manage. Over time, you begin to see that the space left by the person's disappearance can be filled with new experiences, relationships, and personal growth. The world continues to turn, and so must you. Acceptance may feel like an insurmountable challenge. How can you move on when everything feels so raw and unresolved? The absence seems so overwhelming, so present in every moment, that the idea of living without the person seems unfathomable. But as you process your emotions step by step and allow yourself to experience the full range of feelings that come with grief, you begin to see that acceptance doesn't mean you're giving up on the person or the relationship. Instead, it means you're learning to live in a world where their absence is a reality. It means you're no longer fighting against the pain or the sense of loss, but are learning how to carry it with you. It's not about erasing the hurt, but finding a way to move forward with it. Acceptance also involves confronting the fear that life might never be as good as it was when the person was present. You may fear that without them you are incomplete, that your life will lose its meaning or purpose. But what you come to realize is that while this loss has deeply affected you, it does not define your entire existence. Life is still full of opportunities for growth, connection, and fulfillment. As you embrace the power of acceptance, you begin to see that there are ways to continue building your life and finding joy even without that person. Acceptance allows you to see that while you've been changed by the experience, you are still capable of experiencing happiness, love, and purpose in new forms. Part of accepting the loss is understanding that you are allowed to feel joy even in the midst of grief. Often people feel guilty when they begin to experience moments of happiness after a loss. They worry that feeling good means they didn't care enough about the person who is gone, or that they're moving on too quickly. But true acceptance involves recognizing that grief and joy can coexist. It's not about abandoning your sorrow, but about allowing yourself the space to experience the full spectrum of emotions. You can still grieve and honor the memory of the person, while also allowing yourself to embrace life's new possibilities. Over time, this balance becomes part of your emotional landscape, allowing you to live with the absence, not in spite of it. As you continue along this journey of acceptance, you begin to understand that healing doesn't mean you'll ever fully get over the loss. Instead, it means you've reached a point where the pain no longer controls you. It means you can look at the absence and acknowledge it without being consumed by it. You no longer need to search for the answers, explanations, or closure that once seemed so vital. Acceptance helps you release the hold the past has on you and empowers you to take ownership of your present and future. You begin to see that while life may look different without that person, it is still full of potential. The loss becomes integrated into who you are, and you carry it with you as you continue to grow and evolve. Acceptance doesn't mean the absence of sorrow or the erasure of the past. It simply means that you have found a way to live with it. The power of acceptance allows you to create a life that is not defined by what's missing, but by what's still possible. It's the recognition that you are still whole, even in the face of loss, and that you have the strength to continue moving forward, one step at a time. This journey may be long and filled with ups and downs, but in the end, acceptance provides the key to healing. It's the realization that life, with all of its changes and challenges, can still be beautiful, even when things aren't as they once were. Through acceptance, you learn to live with the absence, and in doing so, you find the power to continue building a meaningful life